There was no camera that could record every single word. After the fact, no courtier had the courage to repeat the entire phrase. With that being said, every single person who was sat inside the Windsor State dining room was well aware of what had just taken place. The charge that Queen Camilla made was one that was never intended to be delivered during any official occasion. She stood up from her chair, looked directly across at Catherine, and then presented it. The eyes of the Princess of Wales were not lowered in any way. After carefully placing a single card next to her plate, she reached inside her evening bag, unwrapped it, and waited for it to be placed there. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter so that you don't miss any of our updates before we delve further into the implications of this for the royal family. It was the evening that caused the dust to rise. Events known as Windsor State dinners are ceremonial occasions that are meticulously planned, down to the smallest detail. Chair placements, entrance orders, and seating arrangements are all confirmed in writing by the office of Lord Chamberlain several weeks before any guests arrive. A function that goes beyond merely being decorative is served by this accuracy. This is a declaration made in public. The purpose of a state dinner is to convey to visiting governments, top diplomats, and foreign officials the precise hierarchy of authority within the British royal household, as well as the sequence in which they occupy their positions. Over the course of one of these dinners, 2 government documents gave information that was in direct opposition to one another regarding the same individual. Catherine and William arrived at the ceremony in a calm and methodical manner, utilizing the entrance that is customarily reserved for the Prince and Princess of the United Kingdom. Camilla's household, on the other hand, had been given a distinct written order which said that the Queen and King were to lead from the same entrance first. This contradiction had not been flagged by the protocol office prior to the distribution of both sets of permitted instructions. Hence, by the time the first course arrived, the underlying issue had already become obvious. Before the soup was finished, being cleared, Camilla became aware of the inconsistency. Camilla did not pull Catherine aside. She did not send a quiet word through a nearby courtier, and she did not wait until after the final course to address the issue privately. Instead, Camilla placed her glass down with controlled movement, looked directly across the table at Catherine, and revealed that her entrance had been incorrect. An accusation was made in a measured voice that was calm enough to retain composure, while also being clear enough for top officials who were seated nearby to hear it. It was not an inquiry or a quiet suggestion. Rather, it was an accusation. In order to ensure that everyone at the table had had the time to completely comprehend what had just been spoken, Catherine waited for a moment of stillness to sink in before she responded. No apology was made from the party. On the contrary, she stated that she had adhered to the final written instructions that were communicated to her household that very same afternoon. These instructions contained the approval mark of the protocol office. Rather than making her own decision on the entrance position, she had completely stuck to the authorization that had been given to her. She reached inside her evening bag, unfolded the instruction card, and placed it next to her plate, by doing so in order to accentuate the point she was trying to make. Hi viewers, are you completely amazed by Princess Catherine's absolute royal class when she calmly pulled out the authorized instruction card to completely shut down Camilla's public accusation? Yes or no? It was confirmed by a senior courtier who leaned in to study the approval stamp that it contained a later authorization date than the version that Camilla's team had received. As a consequence of this, 2 distinct documents, each of which carried royal authority, had assigned different women to the same ceremonial entry that evening. For a brief period of time, Camilla's self-assurance was clearly shaken. Although he did not speak, Charles continued to glance down at the table. In front of diplomatic guests, the monarch was confronted with an unsustainable scenario. If he supported his wife, he ran the risk of appearing partisan, but if he supported Catherine, it may be detrimental to the current queen. There was no improvement in the situation or protection for anyone concerned as a result of his quiet. The fact that the disagreement had even made its way to the dinner table was something that Catherine expressed regret over, but she did not apologize for obeying an authorized order. It was essential to make this distinction. An apology would have been interpreted as an admission of fault. The alternative was for her to adopt a firm and courteous stance, which she maintained throughout the entire discussion. Those impressions would be taken back to their respective countries of origin by the guests from other countries, and the courtiers would document their internal responses. The picture of the Princess of Wales presenting a folded card to diplomatic witnesses in order to defend her integrity would have a resonance that would expand well beyond what any statement issued by the palace could ever contain. The supper soon came to an end when the candles were out and the plates were cleared away. The dispute, on the other hand, had already gone beyond the bounds of the room, and its roots went back 6 weeks further than any of the guests at that table were aware of. Catherine appeared for a rehearsal for an investiture ceremony 6 weeks before the state banquet, anticipating nothing out of the ordinary. This was the beginning of the 6-week fuse. A ceremonial royal occasion known as an investiture is a ceremony in which the king recognizes individuals for their contributions to the public. A special prize was to be presented by Catherine alongside the king, as she had been instructed to do. It was planned that the rehearsal would be quick and focused on the procedure. On the other hand, her floor marking had been relocated by someone. At the very last minute, palace planners attempted to make adjustments to the standing positions. The signal that Catherine was supposed to use, which was a small marked spot that indicated where she was supposed to stand during the presentation, had been moved closer to the sovereign. It was a logistical reason that was presented. The reorganization of the seating arrangement made it possible for the award presentation to take place without the participants having to traverse an inconvenient distance on the floor of the ceremony. Camilla was not informed of this alteration, which was a practical adjustment that had been required. When the Queen entered the practice hall and saw Catherine in her new position, she put an end to her performance. The individuals who were present stated that Camilla spoke to Catherine in a manner that was direct and loud enough for the staff members who were nearby to hear her. She stated that Catherine appeared to be standing in the position that she assumed was assigned to her. Although it did not require either a loud voice or a visible display of wrath, the comment was delivered without either of those things. Standing positions at royal rituals provide significance that is frequently overlooked by those who are not familiar with the ceremony. During a formal honor, being in close proximity to the sovereign is a great way to demonstrate trust, authority, and proximity to the crown. In the same way that this particular rehearsal location was interpreted as a purposeful signal of whose influence is more appreciated during formal occasions, even a minor adjustment in rehearsal placement can be understood in this way. There was an immediate response from Catherine, stating that she had not sought the change and offering to relocate. She did this on the spur of the moment, in the hope of preventing the situation from becoming more personal. Her offer was turned down by the coordinator of the rehearsal, who said that the program was already much behind schedule, and that the amended arrangement had been approved in the appropriate manner. Through Catherine's refusal, Camilla was able to pick up on something that Catherine had not intended to communicate. Change in the household's idea of precedence at formal occasions was suggested by the fact that official palace planners were moving the future queen closer to the monarch without consulting the queen, who was currently in power. Camilla's concern, which she refrained from expressing further in that practice session, was that the move was not only a matter of logistics, but also a matter of direction. Upon leaving the rehearsal, Catherine experienced a profound sense of unease. She confessed in William that she was afraid that any duty she accepted would be perceived as an attempt to grab something that was not yet hers. This conversation took place in a private setting and was later recorded in a household report. The prince made an effort to reassure her, but he was aware of the situation that was taking place. In the event that every ceremonial placing turned into a competition over floor places, it would be difficult for the family to collaborate without introducing an element of suspicion into every aspect of the arrangement. It was that same evening that Charles became aware of the transaction. The response that he provided, as reported by an advisor who later documented the conversation, was that the tension would go away if no one gave it any significance. In all honesty, he was of the opinion that not taking sides was the same as saying that peace should be preserved. That being said, it was not. This was nothing more than putting off a reckoning. Two rival household offices continued to make tiny judgments over the course of the subsequent 6 weeks, each of which reflected the tension that the king had decided not to address. 2 different versions of the directions for the Windsor supper were sent to Catherine's team, while Camilla's team kept an older version of the instructions. One of the employees working at the protocol office observed that both documents continued to be active at the same time, and they made the decision not to reconcile them. This selection was not made at random. The fact that the personnel had started taking sides without receiving any guidance from those in power to stop doing so was reflected in this decision. The document that brought about all of the changes, the majority of confrontations with royals, can be handled. Poorly phrased announcement can be changed, an engagement that was missed can be explained away, and a private quarrel between members of the family can be controlled in a discreet manner before it is brought to the attention of the general public. However, it is not possible to easily manage a paper trail that reveals 2 instructions that are in direct opposition to one another, both of which are stamped with official royal authority. That was the exact item that Catherine put on the table at the Windsor residence. It is essential to have a solid understanding of what royal command documents actually signify in order to comprehend why a single folded card held such a significant amount of weight. Not to be confused with casual notes that are passed between assistants. A verified authorization mark is affixed to formal orders that are provided by the Office of the Lord Chamberlain, which is the top royal department responsible for administering state ceremonies and controlling precedence at big events. The act of disobeying a legally sanctioned command can be considered a violation of protocol, but the act of following such an instruction ought to shield the holder from the kind of public charges that Catherine had just been subjected to. One of the instructions had been followed by Catherine. Camilla was in possession of yet another. Additionally, the courtier who studied both documents at the table corroborated the information that was already revealed by the permission stamps. Following the version that Camilla's team had received, the version that was delivered to Catherine's household that afternoon had been amended and authorized. It was therefore the case that the Queen was operating from an out-of-date document that ought to have been recalled and replaced, but no one made sure that it was. The dynamic at the table was completely altered as a result of this discovery. Camilla had entered the argument with complete conviction, feeling that Catherine's actions were foolish, and the instruction that she held seemed to reinforce her idea that Catherine's acts were misplaced. On the other hand, the moment a senior courtier quietly confirmed that Catherine's document bore the later authorization mark, that certainty abruptly disappeared. It was substituted by a reality that was more difficult as the attention switched from Catherine to the royal offices themselves in order to determine who was responsible for the error. It was discovered that a revised instruction had been issued without the original version being withdrawn. There was not a single mistake that could be blamed for this failure occurrence. He came to terms with this fact over the course of several days. A domestic assistant who was connected to Camilla's office was found through an internal examination. This individual was informed of the amended instruction, but they decided not to withdraw the prior version of the directive themselves. According to the story that was recorded, the decision was not made out of animosity for Catherine, but rather out of a wish to safeguard the Queen. However, the assistant was of the opinion that the adjustment would result in Camilla's precedence being diminished, and she hoped that the initial arrangement would be successful. In a short amount of time, Charles stripped the assistant of all formal responsibilities. The manner in which William responded was icy and measured. In his conversation with his father, he explained that penalizing a single worker would not solve the underlying problem, because top officials in the household had failed to set a clear boundary between where Camilla's power ended and where Catherine's future function began. The staff had assumed that they had the right to make decisions of this nature. It had been determined that protectiveness had filled the void that direction ought to have inhabited. The monarch, who opted to remain silent, Charles was keenly aware of the conflict that existed between the two houses. This was the portion of the narrative that individuals who were most directly involved in the incident found to be the most challenging to reconcile. It was the advisor who had provided him with the narrative of what had taken place in the rehearsal room, and he had been present throughout the investiture episode. It had been known to him for several weeks that the two offices were functioning without a united command. He wished that the circumstance would resolve itself before he was compelled to take a stance on the matter. Regarding the management of a royal household, however, hope is not a tactic that is utilized. On that particular evening, William went into the private study and presented his case in a composed manner. He did not raise his voice, but he delivered each syllable with the deliberation of a man who has carefully weighed what needed to be said before entering the room. He did not raise his voice. He shared with his father the news that Catherine had been forced to defend her honesty in front of guests from other countries due to the fact that the palace had been unable to effectively manage its own directives. Furthermore, this failure did not appear out of thin air alone. Due to the fact that no one who had the authority to halt it had decided to do so, it continued to grow. Charles addressed the situation by presenting his son with the internal briefing that had been prepared by the protocol secretary, which further exacerbated the situation. The reason that Catherine had gotten the altered directive, which was a later version with an updated authorization mark, was because Charles himself had ordered that the modification be made. In order to demonstrate continuity and demonstrate to the foreign delegation that the monarchy had a self-assured next generation that was prepared to take the throne, he had desired that Catherine be positioned closer to the younger dignitaries who were visiting than she actually was. Instead, his personal reaction to the situation resulted in his wife being embarrassed in public. A decision that the king had taken and a rectification that he had never communicated to Camilla were directly responsible for the chain of circumstances that led to the creation of the contradicting document, despite the fact that the monarch had not been the one who had written it. William gave himself time to make sense of the information. However, he did not exonerate his father. However, despite the fact that he acknowledged that the procedural failure was the result of an inadvertent technological error, he was clear about where the actual problem originated. Due to the fact that the royal household had never formed a clear notion of authority, a member of Camilla's office staff decided that it was appropriate to continue using the outdated document. Due to the fact that no one in a position of authority had properly specified what the Queen's role would look like after Catherine's responsibilities were more formally established, Camilla's team operated in a defensive manner. The occupier was filled with protectiveness, and this feeling had been increasing for several months. Right before he went into mourning, Charles placed 3 orders. 1, a formal investigation of the orders that were in disagreement with one another. 2, the removal of the assistants who was involved from the ceremonial work that was being performed. Before being disseminated, any significant changes that are made to formal instructions in the future will be subject to writing agreement from both his household and William's team. It was not because it corrected the harm that had already been done that the third option was the most important. Rather, it was because it acknowledged what had caused the problem. There were 2 offices that competed with one another, and they were operating as independent entities within the same institution. Neither of them had a distinct structure between them, nor had a boundary been established between them. For a considerable amount of time, the king, who was in possession of the authority to construct that line, had chosen to remain neutral. The neutrality that exists within a family that is prepared for the succession of generations does not safeguard everyone in the same way. Those individuals who are at ease with ambiguity are the ones who gain from it. while those individuals who require clear direction to carry out their responsibilities without being accused of overreaching are left defenseless. Catherine had been in need of all that clarity. Camilla was also in need of it. Both of the women did not receive it. The result was a public conflict that took place during a formal state supper, a card that was offered as evidence of good faith, and a king who sat alone after midnight, pondering when his silence had ceased to be caution and had become a decision. Catherine penned a note by hand in the room that was devoid of position. She did not have anyone assist her, or have it reviewed by anyone. She folded it and delivered it directly to Camilla, asking for a private meeting without their husband's staff or courtiers, who had been generating concern for months since they were causing them to feel uncomfortable. Camilla has the option of declining the invitation. There were no obligations, no expectation of a response, and no royal authority associated with the note. A negative response would have been comprehensible. Despite this, Catherine was of the opinion that it was necessary to send the note because they needed to discuss the public issue in a private situation where they could communicate openly. When compared to the other rooms in Windsor, the drawing room was quite narrow. Not only was there no fire, but there was also no systematic arrangement of chairs to indicate rank. The first person to arrive was Catherine, who chose to remain standing by the fireplace that was not lit. She did not sit in the chair that was associated with a greater position. It was important to her that their first meeting be free of any reminders of hierarchy, which had been a source of friction in the weeks before to their encounter. Camilla shut the door behind her as soon as she walked in. She took a quick peek at Catherine after noticing the vacant seat, but she did not immediately respond to her. Because there were no staff members, folders, or courtiers present, the typical royal shields were not there. In the future, everything that had transpired was contingent upon their willingness to interact with one another. First to speak was Catherine. She disclosed that the previous altercation had left her with the impression that she was being publicly accused of treason in front of individuals whose respect she needed to maintain in order to become a true queen. Not only did she feel ashamed on a personal level, but the fact that she was challenged in front of significant guests and officials also raised questions about whether or not she was prepared for her post. The public character of the charge, which appeared to be intentional, turned out to be the source of the most pain. It came as a surprise to Camilla that she responded honestly. She admitted that fear was a factor in her behavior. Even though she had put in a lot of effort to get acceptance, she was concerned that it may be taken away at any moment. In the time leading up to Charles's accession to the throne, she experienced a decrease in her sense of significance. Rather than reacting to what Catherine was attempting to do, she turned her attention to the concerns she had over Catherine's future. Camilla was given the assurance by Catherine that she did not desire her marriage position or authority whatsoever. In spite of everything that might occur, all she needed was some space to get ready for her future responsibilities. The journey into the future was not a contest. She was obligated to take note of this responsibility. After that, Camilla removed a state dinner instruction card from her handbag, tore it, and arranged the pieces on the tiny table that was situated between them. Despite the fact that Catherine did not immediately forgive her, she understood that the competition needed to be put to an end in order to safeguard William Charles and the institution that they both served. Catherine committed to have a face-to-face conversation with Camilla about any future concerns that may arise, and Camilla promised to apologize directly. This would take place before the issues become household policies or directives. Following the conclusion of their conversation, Camilla opened the door and allowed Catherine to leave first. This was not a sign of defeat, but rather a fresh start. What remains after the door closes? Catherine and Camilla attended a royal reception together 3 days after the Windsor State dinner. The reception was held in honor of royal guests. Because of their appearance, there was neither an official announcement nor a media briefing. Regardless of the tragedies that had occurred the previous week, they arrived and walked in together. Camilla halted at the door and waited for Catherine to join her. Catherine was waiting for her. There was a slight pause before the doors opened, during which neither of the women spoke. But the brief pause was significant to all of those who were present. A picture was taken of them, entering the event side by side, with no space between them, and it was shown to the whole public. Those who were paying attention to the events that took place during the state dinner were left wondering whether the image depicted genuine reconciliation, or if it was only a planned production. A moment was taken by Camilla, and Catherine accepted the gesture without any hesitation. This was the most important component. One publication published an article with the heading, "Windsor Peace." Those who broadcast in the morning referred to it as image management. A critic on the royal family argued that the public effort was more important than the private activities that were taking on. The reputation of the monarchy is more dependent on the monarchy's ability to portray a unified front than it is on whether or not its members always agree. There was some truth to each of these perspectives. At the conclusion of the supper, certain alterations took place. An aide who worked in etiquette was transferred away from ceremonial work permanently. According to the Office of Lord Chamberlain, a new requirement was implemented. Before any significant alterations to the formal orders could be transmitted to either of the women's teams, they were required to have written clearance from both the King's household and William's office. Charles admitted that there was an error in the directions for the ceremony and reaffirmed that senior members of the family were still dedicated to cooperating with one another. An additional statement was added by Camilla to the official press release, in which she mentioned that she ought to have voiced her concerns in a more private setting rather than at the dinner table. There was a purpose behind this sentence. Every word is selected with great care by the Royal Communications Department. By royal standards, the Queen's statement that the public setting was not appropriate was remarkably simple. She stated that the public location was not suitable. Before Catherine came back, William viewed the joint appearance on a monitor during their time together. Despite the fact that his wife had requested him twice not to address his father about the issue, he went through the entire week feeling angry and protective of his family. Despite the fact that it was difficult for him to refrain from speaking, he acknowledged that she was correct each time. While Charles watched the two women enter together, he experienced a change in his feelings. A senior assistant made the observation that he had come to the realization that the reconciliation that he had been hesitant to help had taken place as a result of the two women in spite of his inaction. A serious disagreement had arisen between them as a result of his cautious avoidance in the weeks preceding up to the meal. They were able to accomplish what he had been unable to do by making the decision to sit together in a small room without their husbands or counselors and discuss topics that were not covered by procedure. The most important thing that everyone should take away from the Windsor State dinner is not merely the fact that royal families dispute that hierarchies lead to competitiveness, or that women who are prepared to succeed one another confront specific pressures that the system frequently ignores. Although the assertions in question are accurate, they are not the most important takeaway. Simple is the most important lesson. There is no way to prevent conflict by avoiding interactions that are required. It merely causes a delay. It is possible for it to develop in a private setting and then emerge in a highly public manner at a later time. The implementation of this idea resulted in the presence of two women, 2 instruction cards, 1 state supper, and the subsequent calm understanding that followed. Personal anxieties are not diminished by one's rank. Status does not eliminate feelings of insecurity. There is no substitute for honesty and power. Prior to the doors opening, Catherine and Camilla were seen standing together at the entrance of the reception area for a brief moment. There were months of stress that had not been expressed between them, a supper that was extremely public, a ripped instruction card that was sitting on a table, and a private agreement that neither of them had to make. However, they entered the room together. You should subscribe right away if you find that this narrative makes you wonder about the future of both ladies, who are members of the monarchy. Everything that is not included in the official statements is covered by us.